I mean, turn it down, but people have to hear me.
No.
That's the
Hang on.
purpose of it.
I think it is the gain.
Well, it's still doing it. Turn off your mic for a second, Steph. See if we're causing. But the gain's the volume, so if you turn that down, no one's going to be able to hear me. I mean, I'm sure if we turned down all the gain, we'd have no feedback problems. But that just started up. Like last night, it just started up. Can everybody still hear me? Okay, yeah. Hopefully, everybody can hear me online. If we're online, we're trying something new today. Those of you who have friends and family who actually watch us online, Facebook's been shutting us down on Sundays. I don't know why. It's like we can only take so much of that Mark guy. Saturdays we're fine. Sundays it won't let us broadcast. So we're broadcasting on YouTube today, hopefully right now, are we? Yeah, at least as far as we know it's working. So hopefully people will find us. We try to leave breadcrumbs for us on Facebook so they can get over to YouTube and find us there. We'll figure it out. Vika, I'm out of water. Could you? Thank you. All right, a couple things. Just real quick about the Thursday night class. But before I get to that, we also have charity going on this month for the McCall family. Cody, who's here with us, he's part of our youth group. And Kat, his sister, lost their father, Mike, a couple weeks ago. And we're raising money all this month for them. So if you just write on your check, Cody, Kat, McCall, whatever you want to write on it, well, 100% of that's going to go to them. The church is going to do something in addition to that. There's a couple of kids, really. Cody's not out of high school yet, and Kat just graduated from college. But she's moved into the house with the grandfather, who's up in age, and Cody in order to take care of them while Cody finishes high school. And then she's going to, I think, move to Newport News, Virginia. But anyway, so that's what's going on. So if your heart is moved that you want to help and support them in any way, just note the check, note the envelope if you put it in with an envelope. If you give online, you can note it there. 100% of that will go over to them as well, whatever the church adds to it. The Thursday night class, some of you come to that, but you weren't here this past week. You lost out because there was a vote on what we're going to cover and do this week. Last time we did that was before we took the break. We had some write-in votes that were sent in for the vote that actually carried the day, and Victoria was upset about that because the vote went against her and by these write-in people. We didn't do that this time. You had to be there to vote. It was voted upon, so we're starting a series on spiritual warfare. So that's starting up this coming Thursday. You have not missed anything yet. We just did a deeper dive on faith this past week, but we're going to do and I don't exactly know what it's going to look like yet either, so it's kind of exciting for me as well. But spiritual warfare, as I've said, you are in a spiritual warfare. You just may not know it, and you may not be armed, but you are in it. So we're going to talk about the weapons that we can use in spiritual warfare and what's going on and how you can recognize spiritual warfare in your home and your life. And as always, we're taking a very calculated approach to the subject. We're not going to get way out there. We're not passing snakes around or anything like that. We're not going to get crazy, but it is a very important topic, and so we're going to take a look at that. That's the Thursday class. That's it then, right? 7 p.m. Thanks. Thank you, Stephanie, for asking an important question. Just go to the tattoo parlor and make a right. It's right there, right after the tattoo parlor. We're in the loft. Just FYI, Dan had a contractor in here this week. He thinks he can completely remove these posts in 2 days. He's getting an architectural approval on that, and then we'll get rid of those. That'll be nice. I won't be staring around the posts as some of you, and then we'll recarpet the place. So we got a lot of work to get done before our anniversary in November, but we want to fix the place up and get it ready, and then get ready because we're going to kind of do something we've never done. We're going to actually kind of advertise that we're here. We're going to send out mailers. I want to see if we can get people to put things on doors and just tell people, hey, there's this church here. It's frustrating me. We've been here for 6 years. I still get people say, you're where? Right by the Chinese restaurant. I go to the Chinese restaurant all the time. I've never seen you. Well, we're between a Chinese restaurant and Fox's. Oh, I just bought Fox's Pizza yesterday. You're not there. Yes, we really are. But anyway, so we're trying to fix that. So get ready. I want to do a bunch of things with that. All right, so, but we're picking up and we're continuing on with the series we have going on about Abraham. And this was an interesting sermon to me because it didn't fit into my picture of what I wanted in this series. Because it's like, I kind of pick my sermon series these days a little bit selfishly, because the only time I get to study the Bible or learn anything is when I'm going to preach about it, because that's all I have time for. And so I thought, well, I really want to learn more about faith, And I know that Abraham's the father of faith. He's a paradigm of faith for us. And I thought, well, we'll just teach on Abraham. That way I'll learn about faith. And if anybody learns while I'm doing that, good for you. But, I'm just kind of selfish here. And so I get to this topic today in the beginning of Genesis 18. Last week, like I said, is kind of this pinnacle in Abraham's life. And he's this great moment of faith. It's so great that it's talked about 2,000 years later. And that was really cool. I like that. I like that sermon a lot because I think it gives a new angle on faith that I'd never really considered before. I had a lot of people tell me I never thought about faith like that. And so that was great. And then this week's sermon, I kind of get stuck on the first part of Genesis 18. And I'm thinking, I don't know, God. This sermon almost seems like it doesn't belong in big church. This almost seems like something, you should go to Vacation Bible School and get, or CCD class for you Reformed Catholics. And it's like, something like maybe there, you could teach with flannelgrams or something. I don't know if this really fits. And what I want to do is I want to learn about great faith. And this doesn't seem to be moving towards that. And God challenged me, I think, with a question that I'm going to then in turn challenge you. Why do you want great faith? Why do you want great faith? Now, if you don't want great faith, that's fine. Don't even think about this question. But if you do, if you thought to yourself, I wish my faith were greater, then why do you want it? Or maybe put another way, what would you do differently? Or how would your life be different if you had great faith? And, there's a lot of answers for that. If I had great faith, I think my prayers would get answered more. Because that seems to be a big part of getting prayers answered is faith. So maybe if I had more faith, I'd see some of these prayers that I've been praying answered. That'd be great. I just would have a better relationship with God probably. I'd probably live through the doubt a little bit easier because my faith is greater. And I think all these different things. But God was really challenging me, and I'm going to come back to that question, but just think about that for a moment. What would you do? How would your life be different if you had great faith? Okay, now, stick a pin in it. We're moving on to the story. So here's where we were last week. Abraham came to God and said, look, this whole thing with my child's not going to happen through Sarah. I have a child through Hagar. Let's just go ahead and declare them heir. His name's Ishmael. Let's go ahead and bless him, and let's just move on with this. Right? And God said, nope. I am still going to give you a child. It's going to come from you and Sarah, like I said, 24 years ago. I'm going to do that. And so we talked about how Abraham really didn't necessarily show great faith. He laughed in God's face when he told him that. Ha, 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 that's not going to happen. But then he went out and did it because, as we said last week, faith is not a feeling. Faith is a decision. So that's kind of the key point of last week's sermon. So we go from there to chapter 18, and I'm ready for the child. I don't know about you. We've been talking about Abraham now for several weeks. When's God going to give this child a promise to him? And it kind of happens not now, but he comes in chapter 18 and tells them when. So we finally are going to get a date. And that's really important. I know you women know how important it is to get a guy to give you a date on something, like my wife. When are you going to take out the garbage? I'm going to. Yes, but when? I need to know when you're going to do that. Before Christmas. When's that going to happen? Yeah, I saw that. When's the bathroom going to be finished? I saw that. I wasn't going to go there. Yeah, okay. But, we get dates. It's nice. We are well-intentioned, right? We have these ideas. We're going to do it. We promise you we're going to do it. When? We got to get a date. So finally, God's going to come and give a date. He's going to give a date, and that kind of helps. So that starts out, and here it goes. So Abraham's sitting at the door of his tent, because apparently it's a very large tent. He keeps messing with my chair. I'm like sitting way down and looking up at you guys. And he lifts his eyes up and he looks, and behold, there's 3 men standing in front of him. Now, they didn't just appear, but I don't know if you've ever been in a really, really hot area where you can't stare out in the distance for very long because it kind of hurts your eyes. You see those waves coming up off the hot land and things. And so he's just kind of there, and he's kind of wiping his eyes, and there are people coming. Now, he doesn't live on, next to Route 48 where cars going by all the time and visiting. He lives kind of in the middle of nowhere because he's a very rich landowner. So his tent's not going to be at the edge of his property. It's going to be in the middle of his property. And so people coming by his tent doesn't happen very often. And it's a big deal because, they don't have internet or television or any of those things that ruin lives. They simply have tents and farm stuff. And so a new person coming by, they bring news, they bring ideas that are going on in the world around them. And so it's kind of a big deal. And suddenly, here's these new people. And he gets excited. When he sees him, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and says, Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. And he goes on. He says, in fact, I'll bring a morsel of bread. You can have to refresh yourselves. And after that, then you can go on, but you've come by. In other words, he's saying, look, if it's okay, if you don't mind, if I stay here for a little bit. Let me give you some refreshments, and you can rest up before you go on. And they say, go ahead, that sounds good. So Abraham goes quickly into the tent to Sarah and says, quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it and make cakes. So he goes in and says, I need three cakes, quick. I can't imagine me doing that with Victoria. Knock, knock. Hey, Vika, 3 cakes, real fast. I got guests coming. It's like, okay. So then he goes and runs to the herd, takes a calf, which was tender and good, and gives it to someone else who prepares it. So he's not just going to give him bread, right? He's going to actually kill a fatted calf. And then he took curds and milk and a calf he prepared, and he set it all before him. He must have been flying around there, getting all this ready while they were getting rested, And he stood by them under the tree while they ate, like to make sure they had everything they needed, almost like he's a waiter. And then they say to him, where's Sarah, your wife? Now, probably they've been talking a little bit. That's how he knows. Or maybe they heard him shout, Sarah, Sarah, get the pies ready. And he says, well, she's in the tent. And then, finally, the scripture said who these people are. The Lord, says like the Lord and 2 of his angels, the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year. And when I do, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now, it takes 9 months to have a baby. So you got to get busy, because I'm going to be back this time next year. And he's already going to be here. So we kind of have a date now. And they tell him that. And the question, I think, is why now? Last week he does this amazing thing after God tells him that. He goes off and circumcises 387 people. And that's kind of a big deal. And he's done many big deals. But I believe God waited until this moment to do it for a reason, because I believe God was trying to catch Abraham doing something good. Now, that wasn't hard to do with Abraham. I think he was a good guy. I think he did a lot of good things. But I think God is using a technique that parents know, and I hate to say this, put this in the same category, but dog trainers know. Sometimes if you're trying to reinforce good behavior, you wait till you see it, then you reinforce it. See, it's one thing if you tell them to do it, and then you reinforce it. But that's not as good. Every parent knows this. Is you catch them doing something good, and you reward it, right? Because it's like, wow, look at you. You did that on your own. You reward it. I believe God's rewarding good behavior here. Again, this is who Abraham is. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he's only done this time. He's a very generous man. We see that because he takes in his brother's son after his brother dies and treats him as his own. When they're in the land, they're kind of divvying up the land, he says, you take whatever you want, and then I'll take what's left over. That's hugely generous in a way nobody would have been. He's a generous man. But God waited for one of those generous moments before he came and told him this. He gave him the opportunity to be generous and then told him this because I just believe he's trying to reinforce something, not just for Abraham, but for us. And so while he's talking, Sarah's listening, right? She's in the tent door and she's listening. And she's listening, and Sarah says, the way the women had passed, which means she's through menopause, right? And she's listening, and Sarah laughs to herself. And you can kind of be with her on this. She's 89 years old, right? And so, is that right? No, yeah, it's 89 years old. So she's 10 years old, younger than Abraham, and Abraham's about 99 here. After I'm worn out, she says, 89, she's worn out. And my Lord is old. Now I'm going to get pleasure. Now, like I said last week, they hadn't had conjugal visits in a while. This is nuts. He's like, I don't know. How's this even going to happen? She laughs. What are you going to do? It's so crazy. She just laughs. But this is not a laugh of joy. This is a laugh of disbelief. You know the laugh. And so the Lord says to Aaron, why did Sarah just laugh just now? Why would she laugh right now? And, again, we can certainly understand why, because it's crazy. It's crazy. But then he goes on and says, is there anything too hard for the Lord? I can do this. I can do this. And at the appointed time, I'm going to return to you. This time next year, about this time next year, when I get here, Sarah's already going to have a son. And then Sarah now denies it. I didn't laugh. She goes, oh, yes, you did. But he's not mad at her for it. He's just calling her out. It's just the same thing he does with Abraham. So he says, I'm going to do this. After 25 years of waiting, 25 years since he first came and said, rise and go, 25 years. Why now? Why now? I believe it's not at all coincidence that he comes right after they show kindness to a stranger. And in fact, it might be tempting to think that when you see how Abraham talks to them that he actually knew who this was. Because he calls them lords. And I'll be your servant and all this. But actually that was just the culture. If you're in that culture, especially in that time, and you had strangers approach you, you treated them formally and politely, like we used to do in this country. We don't anymore, but we used to, there's a very informality rules now in America, but there was a time, you met somebody for the first time, you were very polite and formal with them. My dad would be called Mr. Grice, not ever Ken. It was always Mr. Grice, and until people got to know you, it was always that. Ukraine's even stronger with what they have. Victoria's, I always call her Victoria, but actually if I know her well, I'm supposed to call her Vika. But people who don't know her well is not supposed to call her Vika, and a kid will never call her Vika, not in Ukraine, So it's like that. There's formalities that used to be a lot bigger and stronger. In this time, in this culture, that was how it was done. It was like you'd be very formal and very polite, right? Because you don't even know who they are. And so I don't believe that he had any idea who they were until God revealed himself. And in fact, the writer of Hebrews says this, and I think he's talking exactly about this incident. He says, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. And King James Version, I actually kind of like the way they put it very poetically. They use the word, they have entertained angels unaware. So angels unaware. And so I think that this is something that's very, very important and near and dear to God's heart. I think the reason why he withheld the actual fulfillment of the promise until this is because he wanted us to notice what Abraham did. He also wanted us to notice who Abraham was. It's like he put this on. This is who he was. And I think it's important to know that you're never going to be a person of great faith unless you are also a person of great kindness. Because the whole purpose of this is to have the fruits of the Spirit in us so that people look at us and see God. And God's kind. And if you look at Jesus, he's kind, and so are his disciples. It's all throughout the Bible. God rewards kindness to strangers in a very special way. So I'm going to give you a couple quick examples of this to kind of drill it home. The first one is Elijah and the widow. And let me set this up real quick. Victoria said I took too long on this last night, and so I'm going to try to be quicker today so I don't bore her. But basically, real quick setup on this. What's happened is Elijah has approached the king, and because of his wickedness and evilness, has said there'll be a drought in the land until God restores the rain. And so then he goes and hides, and there's a drought in the land, and everything dries up, not just in that area, but all the surrounding area. And when that happens, money gets tight, because that was like everything to them. That was commerce, because your animals are going to die, you have no crops. When you have no water, you're in big, big, big trouble. And so that's what happens. It goes throughout the land. God takes care of Elijah for a long time, and then like halfway through it, he goes, you know what? I'm going to send you to somebody else now to take care of you. And so that's where we pick up the story. Elijah rose and went to Zarephath, which isn't, by the way, in Israel. So he went to a city of Gentiles. And when he came to the gate of the city, indeed a widow was there gathering sticks. Now, why is she gathering sticks? Well, because she needs firewood, and that's all you can do in those days. And so she's just gathering sticks. Now, if she had money, then she could have maybe had somebody deliver firewood, but she doesn't. So she's out gathering her own sticks. And he calls her and says, please bring me a little water in a cup that I may drink. So he comes into the city, he sits down just like a man and asks a woman to bring him a drink. So that's what basically happens here. This is Elijah. He says, bring me a drink. And she's going to go do it. As she's going to get it, he calls her and says, by the way, bring me a little bit of bread while you're at it. When you go by your house, can you bring me some bread too? Like, man, what a pushy prophet this is, right? He sits down, I don't want water, but, you can go get me some bread too. I want a little bit of something to eat. I'm hungry after my long journey. And she turns to him. Now you have to understand that in those days especially, still somewhat true this day, but in those days especially, widows had nothing. Because in those days, men owned things. And if you were going to own property or something, you had to be a guy. So a woman usually would have already had her property taken by his family. Now they're supposed to take care of her, but they usually or oftentimes would find ways out of their responsibilities. They'd get the land, but they wouldn't take care of her. So the Bible is very, very keen on taking care of widows and orphans because they had nothing in those days. And so God sends Elijah, his prophet, to a widow of all people. You would think, man, you could have taken him someplace with somebody who had more, but goes to the widow. Now watch what happens though. She turns. Remember, she is not a Jew. She is not a worshiper of Jehovah. And so she turns and she says this, as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread. I have only a handful of flour in a bin and a little oil in a jar. And you see one of these sticks I'm gathering? You know why? I'm going to use them to make a small little loaf of bread, and my son and I are going to eat it, and then we're going to die. This will be our last meal. I don't have it. It's not that I don't want to share with you. I've got nothing. I don't really even have enough for me and my son, and we're going to eat it and die. You want to eat it and die with us? Because that's what my life looks like right now. That's where I'm heading. This is all I have. And so Elijah says, no, that's okay. Listen, do not fear. Go and do as you say, but make me a small cake from it first. First. Not later. First. See, this is crazy, but God always wants it first. That's faith. Faith is first. There's a story a missionary told about he was in this village and he was teaching the concept of tithing. This little boy was there. The next day, there's a knock on his door. He opens up and this little boy's got this fish. He says, here. He takes it. He says, what's this? He says, that's my tithe. And he looks, and it's all he has, one fish. He said, where are the other 9 fish? He says, they're still in the river. I'm going to go get them. You know, so that's the concept, right? First to God. And so this is where he's giving an opportunity to show a great deal of faith. And she does, but he promises this. He says this. He says, give it to me first, and afterwards make some for yourself and your son. With what? She's using it all up to give him. But he says, here's why. Thus says the Lord God of Israel, the bin of flour will never be used up, nor shall the jar of oil, until this drought's over. So here's the opportunity here. I'm going to let God take care of you throughout this whole drought. By the way, during this drought, other people are going to starve to death in the streets, but not this widow. Because she has the faith. And she goes and she does exactly as they say. And did according to Elijah, and she and he and her whole household, which was basically just her son, ate for many days. The bin of flour was never used up, nor did the jar of oil run dry, according to the word of the Lord, which had been spoken to by Elijah. So her faith kept them alive, but that happens after she was generous and kind to a stranger. She didn't know who Elijah was. If she had, she probably wouldn't be talking to him because there was a price on his head. They were trying to kill him. So here's an opportunity now for her to show great faith, but she shows it through kindness to a stranger. And I want to show you, she wasn't praying for him. She wasn't sending him warm wishes. She was feeding him. She was giving him something to drink. So that's really kind of cool that God was then keeping her alive. But wait a minute. There's more. God plays a deep game. He's not stopping here. This wasn't really why God set all this up. I'm sure Elijah thought it was, but this is not the end. This is just the beginning, because this is just who God is. Because later, as the famine's coming to an end, as it happened after all these things, the son of the woman who owned the house became sick. And his sickness, like the way Bible puts this, was so serious there was no breath in him, i.e. he died. He died. He passed his last breath and he died. And she goes to Elijah and says, what do you have against me that you would take my son? Why would you do that? I'd rather die with him than die without him. This is crazy. And Elijah says, give me your son. And he's kind of cool on the outside, but inside he's freaking out. What's going on? He doesn't know what's going on. He has no idea what's going on. So he takes him out of the room, carries him up to where he was staying, and lays him down in the bed. He shuts the door, and then he freaks out. This is good. This is the way Christians should do it, in the quiet of the room. Then you freak out. He cries out to the Lord, oh, Lord, my God, have you brought tragedy on the widow with whom I lodged by killing her son? God didn't kill her son. Her son was always going to die. That's why he sent Elijah there. See, he knew. We don't know why he died. Probably some sickness or illness. He was going to die. And that's why Elijah was sent there. Because God knew he was going to cry out to him, and God was going to heal him. So he actually sent him there to save the son's life and not let him die. And so God, I pray, let the soul come back to him. And then the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came back to him, and he revived. And Elijah calmly takes him back down. Here's your son. You know, I like this. He's like, real cool. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, no big deal. Just raise a child from the dead. It's cool, you know. So he gives her son back. But I love this because the woman takes the son, so excited. But look what she says. Now, by this I know that you are a man of God. Really? Now? We have watched oil and flour in a jar not go empty for months. Only now we say, yeah, I guess maybe you might be, man of God. This is like a tough crowd, you know. Man, this is really tough when you have to see a resurrection from the dead before you believe. But that's a big deal, right? So it's a really big deal. So God actually sent Elijah to her, not only to prolong their lives by giving them food, but to raise the son from the dead when he died. That's pretty cool, and that's a great story, and it actually parallels nicely with Abraham's story, because watch what happens in Abraham's case. He's given a life. In her case, a life is saved. That's pretty cool. I could stop there, but I'm just getting started. This is all throughout the Bible, as a matter of fact. And so now I'm going to skip ahead to Exhibit B. This is Elisha, a little bit different than Elijah. Different man, further up in the thing, and there's a very famous story called the Shunammite woman. Now, I'll just quickly set the stage here. He's traveling all around. Elisha goes around and he does all kind of things for God. He preaches, he speaks for God, he gives prophecy, but he also does miracles. He's like God's servant on earth. And so he's been doing that. And the Shunammite woman takes note of him. Now, she's called a notable woman in the Bible, which means she's rich. Family rich, all kind of money. So she's a notable woman. She's probably very well connected in the government, and the people really respect her. But she sees him, and she says, come and eat. You're not getting very good food. Come to my house. We'll give you a good meal. And Elisha never passes up a good meal, so he goes there, and they have this great meal, and they have, he speaks with the family, and they have this great time together. And it got to be that every time he came by, he would turn in to go to her house and get a meal and spend the night, right? So she lived over their whole estate. And so she says to her husband, you know what? This is a holy man of God. We should do something. Let's take notice of the fact that he comes by here a lot and he has no place to stay. So instead of making him stay in a hotel and come by occasionally, let's make a small upper room up there on the wall. And then she thinks about it. What would a man of God need? We'll put a bed in there and a table and a chair and a lampstand. She really thought about this. This is what a man of God would need. And we'll put it there. And whenever he comes, he can just go there and stay. It's like it'll be his home away from home, and just stay there. And she really took the time in order to think about it and do it in order to make room in her life for the man of God to come by. Always a good idea to make room in your life for God, by the way. And amazing things will happen if you just have God coming by. And so she's done all that. And so they do. And as it happened, on one day, he came by, and he was talking to his servant, and he says, we should do something for her. What can we do for her? And he actually goes to her once and asks her, what can I do for you? She says, nothing. I'm skipping that part. And I thought that's really interesting, because now when he talks to the servant, he says, what can we do for her? Her servant says, well, she has no children and her husband's old. Oh, she has no children. This is interesting to me because in those days, like, a woman's worth was established by how many children she had. And it was a really big deal, especially sons, somebody to carry on the family name. It was really, really important. She didn't have any of that. She had riches, she had family name, but she had no children, which certainly was difficult on her. But I want to show you that she never, never, never let that unfulfilled desire turn into bitterness. That's an important thing. She wasn't bitter at all about it. She never mentioned to Elijah. She didn't say anything. She didn't let any bitterness stop her. And it's really important because bitterness will kill kindness. And we need to develop kind lives, and I believe we do. We need to get bitterness out. Because bitterness is like poison that will just kill it at the root. So we got to get that out. And so when Elisha finds out she doesn't have a child, she says, well, bring her up. Let's tell her. So they go get her, and he says, you know what? About this time next year, look at the parallel between this and the story of Abraham. About this time next year, you're going to embrace your son. And she says, don't mess with me. Basically, she says, hey. You know what? This is a dream that I've had for a long time, and I put it away. I finally got to the point where I'm no longer crying when I walk by that empty room in my house. I'm over it. Don't mess with me. Don't you go telling me to get my hopes back up. I've shut that off. I'm okay. He says, no. About a year from now, you'll have a son. And so he leaves and comes back about a year, and son begun. There he is. She's got her son, just like he said. Again, the parallels with this and what's going on in Abraham's life are very, very strong. And again, I think should be pointed out, it was after she was kind to a stranger that God gave her the desire of her heart. She wasn't even asking for it anymore. She wasn't even praying for this anymore. He gave her the desire of her heart. And that is incredible. That's a cool story. But wait, there's more. Because God doesn't stop with one thing. He never stops with one thing. So what happens, and I'll skip through some of the details of this, but what happens is the son grows up and dies. He's in the field one day with his dad, and he gets, they believe, an aneurysm. Sounds like his head starts hurting. He goes and dies, like in his mother's arms. He's just, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years old at this point. And she takes the body and puts it in Elijah's room. He's not there. And she goes after him. She says, I know one person who can help me. He's dead, but I know a person who speaks for the living God. And so she goes and finds him, and Elijah he has no idea why she's coming. And Elijah says to his servant, well, go do whatever she wants, and it fails. And she says, I'm not leaving without you. And so Elijah said, okay, I'll go with you. And he has no idea why. She hasn't told him, and God hasn't told him. And so he follows her back. So when Elijah came with her to the house, there was the child lying dead on his bed. There's a shock. I guess he figured it out at that point. Oh, this is it. Okay. All right. And so he shuts the door, gets alone with God, and he prays over the body like several times. He prays over the body and keeps praying for God and praying for God. Please restore this child's spirit to him. And when he was all done, like going through that many, many, many times, he finally gets to the point where the child warms up and he stretches himself out and he prays for him. And I love this. The child sneezed 7 times. Why? Why does the Bible say he sneezed 7 times? I think it's because he sneezed 7 times. I honestly don't know that there's any kind of reason for that, right? I don't think it's like the 7th one brought his spirit back. I think 6 sneezes wouldn't have been enough. I just think the Bible says, well, he sneezed 7 times. I guess I'll write that down, the writer here. So anyway, he opens his eyes and he calls to the Shunammite woman. She comes in and he says, well, you better pick up your son. He's sneezing. And she falls to the feet, bows to the ground. Then she picked up her son and she went out. So again, not only did God reward her with a child, but he saved the child from a disease, probably an aneurysm. So there's 2 stories, but I got one more for you here. God's not done yet. One more. I'm going to give you, and I could actually find a lot of these. And the reason why I keep pointing them out is I want to show you this pattern. Kindness to stranger, and the reason why that's important, why a stranger? Because a stranger's not going to pay you back. Sometimes you help a friend out, and if you're in need, the friend will help you out. But a stranger passing by you, and you help them out, you'll never see him again. So this really shows where your heart is. Are you just trying to be kind, or are you kind of doing something to get something? Right? So kindness to a stranger. Let me give you one. This is a guy you probably know, Jesus. In this case, he's the stranger. He's going through now. What happens? This happens in a book of John, and it happens several times. There's 3 stories about Mary and Martha and their brother, whose name is Lazarus. So what happens is that they're coming by, and Martha's kind of like the Shunammite woman. She's very wealthy, and she's got it going on. She's a businesswoman. She's very organized, a little bit of a type A personality. And she talks Jesus into coming over to her house to visit. And he does. And they became friends. He became friends with the whole family. And the Bible actually tells us he loved them. They're good, close friends of his. Wherever he came by, just like the Shunammite woman, he would go stay at Martha's house because it was her house, and Mary was there, and Lazarus was there. He got to know them all very, very, very well. I'm going to skip over some of the stories about this, but what happens after this, after he's been by several times, they establish a friendship, is he's in a city about days ride away, and Lazarus gets sick and is going to die. He's like sick unto death. And so they said, okay, I'm gonna have to go. So Jesus comes, and a man named Lazarus was sick. He was the brother of Mary and the sister of Martha, and her sister Martha. And the sisters sent word to Jesus saying, Lord, your very good friend is sick. I was like, don't want to kind of make a big deal of this, but the guy you really good friends with, he's sick. And Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And he says to the disciples, our friend Lazarus, and they all knew him, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to go wake him up. And his disciples say, what for? He's asleep. He'll wake up on his own. And he says, well, okay, I guess I wasn't being clear. He died. So he just tells them plainly, I was trying to be gentle about this, but Lazarus died. And that's okay, because you're going to see a miracle now. I'm actually glad for your sake, because a miracle is going to happen. So he goes there. Upon his arrival, he finds Jesus. Lazarus is already in the tomb. In fact, he's been there for 4 days. That's a very long time for him to be there. So that's the setup. So he's going to come, and he's going to come to the house, and they sent for him, but he didn't arrive in time. He's too late. God's too late. And Lazarus is dead. But as I like to say, the infinite God is never out of time. So Martha comes out to Jesus and says, too late. Lazarus is dead. If you'd been here sooner, he wouldn't be dead. And Jesus says, can you trust me? And she says, I don't know. I understand that he's going to be raised. He says, if he's going to be raised again, he says, your brother will rise again. He's trying to tell her. She says, I know, in the final day. I understand. I know who you are. I know we'll all be risen in the final day. But he's dead now. Here and now, he's dead. And Jesus talks to her for a little bit, and she's just not getting what he's trying to say. He's trying to give her a hint that I'm here to do a miracle greater than what you asked. You asked for a healing. I'm going to give you a resurrection. The greatest miracle, actually, Jesus is probably going to perform on earth is about to come up. He saved it for one of his friends. And so they finally go to the house, and Mary hears, and she rushes out because she heard Jesus is there. And the first thing she says is, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. These are true statements, by the way. There's nothing untrue about what either sister said. If you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. And Jesus says, it's okay. Take me to where he is. And so they finally take him to the tomb, and this is like one of my favorite prayers Jesus prays. Because here it is. I'm going to read this. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. I said that for the benefit of the people around here. That just cracks me up that Jesus does that. He's like talking, and they actually hear him say that. I just said that for the people who are here. I know you always hear me. Because he didn't have to do that at all. That's the whole point. And then he says, in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man comes out with cloth wrapped around his face, and Jesus says, got to take off the dead, grave cloth. He's alive. So here's the situation. This all took place. The reason the friendship, he's good friends with him, but it all started because Martha first offered Jesus her home whenever he was by. She didn't have to do that. A lot of people visited with Jesus and had him visit with them. They didn't do that. Because Jesus doesn't come alone, y'all. He comes with 12 hungry men. I mean, it's a big deal to have them over. It's not just Jesus. It's the disciples. You got to feed them all. That's why when he turns and says, you're our friend Lazarus, they all knew Lazarus. They hung out there. They knew who Lazarus was. This was a big thing. Martha says, whenever you and your disciples come by, Bethany is where they lived. Whenever you come by Bethany, our home is your home. We're going to open it up to you. That's a big deal. She didn't have to do that. She did that before she even knew who Jesus was, really. She just knew he was a good man that was trying to do God's work. And by the way, when she chose to be Jesus' friend, she made herself an enemy with the temple. And she was a Jew. There had been privileges revoked from her because she was friends with Jesus. And the people who ran the temples already didn't like him. It wouldn't be long from this, by the way, that Jesus is crucified. But it all starts because she showed a kindness to Jesus, who was a stranger to her. Here's the deal. God never wastes a kindness. Ever. There's always a reward for kindness given. You may not see it here on earth, but I believe the reason why God shows these stories in the Bible of Elijah, Elisha, and Martha, and Abraham is because he wants us to remember that we're here for a purpose. And a lot of times when we seek greater faith, we're seeking it selfishly. Let's be honest. I want to see my prayers answered. I want to have a better relationship with God. I want to be able to not live through the doubt. I want to have better guidance. I want to see the gifts of the Spirit. It's kind of selfish. And what I believe God's tying all this stuff into is, but for what? What's the purpose? In every one of these stories, it actually seemed like that kindness was a small thing, but it was literally life and death. Literally life and death. People lived or died depending on that kindness. They didn't even know it. That's not why they did it. They just simply were trying to be kind to somebody. And I'm like, as I'm preparing the sermon, like, wait a minute, well, God, this sounds like a Mr. Rogers episode. This whole sermon comes down to this. You're telling us, be nice? Honestly? Like, Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse or something?
Be nice.
Come on.
I want you to be nice.
Okay.
Ask him to walk, but be nice. If he won't walk, walk him, but be nice. If you can't walk him, one of the others will help you, and you'll both be nice.
That's what it's all about, right? This whole sermon comes down to be nice. Really? Honestly? Here's the point. To be a Christian of great faith, you must first be a Christian of great kindness. And that's what God kind of hit me with. This is why we need to preach on kindness, because faith has to be tied back to kindness. That's what it's for. That's what this is all for. In fact, James, Jesus' brother, puts it this way. What good is it if someone says he has faith but has no works, does no kind things? Watch how he describes works. Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is without clothing and in need of daily food, and one of you says to them, hey, just go in peace, be warm, be filled, the original send warm wishes, and yet you don't give them what's necessary for their body, what use is that? So what good is this? Faith of yours, what is that? It's nothing, it's dead. But I want you to see that he's not talking about praying for them. This is something that, when God said, what do you want faith for? I said, well, I'll pray for people when they come, So, if I had the great faith, we could see these great miracles. I pray for healings in people's life. That's good. This isn't at all what God's talking about, though. Not that we shouldn't pray for people for healings, but he's saying, no, it's got to be a lot more practical. Blue collar. Our Saviors came, and as far as I know, this is unique in religions. Our Savior came to us not as a teacher, but as a carpenter. We have a blue-collar Savior. We're called to a blue-collar religion. Jesus fit right in Pittsburgh, right? We're supposed to be blue-collar Christians, practical, taking care of people, real simple stuff. The examples he gives, sometimes we talk about faith and works. Oh, works are bad because we think we have to work our way to... No, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about not facing Mecca 3 times and praying, doing things, doing kind things for people. That's what he means when he says works. He says your faith is useless otherwise. Faith is useless if it isn't used in God's service. In fact, Jesus puts it this way. He said, at the end of the world, when I'm judging, people are going to come up to me, and everybody's going to think they know me. But what matters is if I know them. And he says, I'm going to tell this to some people. I'm going to say, you know what? When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was in a hospital, you came and visited me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. You did those things for me. And Jesus says, they're going to turn to me and say, I don't think so. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And then the king will answer, I say, when you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me. God's watching. He's looking to try to catch you doing something good, because we are supposed to be his representatives on earth. And if we're not, what good are we? Seriously, what good are we? Here's the thing. We pray for things that are important in our lives. I'm not telling you to stop doing that. We're allowed to do that. We're allowed to pray for the burdens in our lives. We're allowed to pray for healings. We're allowed to pray for provision, that God will take care of us. He wants us to come with all these things. I would lump all these things together in our daily bread section of the Lord's Prayer. We're allowed to pray for daily bread. In fact, as we pray for the daily bread and God gives us, and we start understanding who Jehovah Jireh is, our faith grows. It does. It grows step by step. But it will grow leaps and bounds when you exercise it by being kind to others. We are supposed to be people of great faith, but we are also supposed to be people of great kindness, and we can't have one without the other. Would you please pray with me? Heavenly Father, I do thank you that you have given us an example to follow. You don't just tell us what to do and expect us to do it. You've shown us what to do. Help us understand the importance of being representatives here on earth. Help us understand the importance of showing kindness to those around us. Grow our faith, Lord, and grow our kindness, for we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.